Welcome to the Apostate Sisters interview series, where we get to know fellow survivors of the Worldwide Church of God. We'll hold space for the personal journeys of those who have navigated the challenge of cult life and found their way out. Each episode, we sit down with former cult members to uncover their unique stories of struggle, resilience, and liberation. Through these conversations, we aim to shed light on the complexities of cult dynamics, the process of deconstruction, and the profound journey towards self-discovery and healing. Join us as we explore these deeply moving narratives, offering insights and inspiration to anyone on a path to reclaiming their own voice and freedom. Let's meet today's guest, David.
Hey.
Hi, David.
Hi, David.
Hello, ladies.
Thank you so much for joining us today. I know you and Patty have conversed a lot. It's nice to, I guess, officially meet you. Thank you for being on our interview series. You're one of the first.
Well, thank you. My pleasure.
Now, David, you've been watching the podcast for at least a few months at this point, or a couple months at this point, and you've always had some really deeply insightful comments to give on the channel, primarily stemming from your life story and what you remember of the 1970s. So we wanted to open this space up and give you what kind of space you might need to share your story.
Sounds good. Well, actually, my story even starts back in the 60s because, like you guys, I was almost born into the Worldwide Church of God. When I was, when I was an infant, my parents were evangelicals, but about the time I was probably 3 or 4 years old, my father had discovered a Plain Truth magazine somewhere. I don't know where. Then he and my mother shortly after that converted. So as early as I have any memories, we lived in Pasadena, California at the time. The family was already involved in the Worldwide Church of God. So as a child, it's interesting how it started to come into my awareness as part of what I was, I guess. Really kind of started with the whole Sabbath thing. That was the first thing that I noticed that was different from other people, is that we would, rather than going to church on Sunday like everybody else, we would observe the Sabbath. So the Sabbath started at sunset on Fridays and went straight through to sunset on Saturdays. And so every Friday, my mother would be doing what she called preparation for the Sabbath, which was basically, so does that terminology ring a bell with you ladies?
Yes, it absolutely does.
Sounds familiar.
Yeah, preparation for the Sabbath. And I guess, the terminology made it sound like something special or whatever, but basically it's just, I guess, getting ready to observe the Sabbath. And the Sabbath was interesting because, with the Worldwide Church of God, on the Sabbath, you're not supposed to do any kind of work at all.
Right.
So, they tried to get everything prepared for the Sabbath so we could just, I guess, worship God for straight 24 hours. And that was the preparation for the Sabbath. And we would go to church literally every week without fail on Saturdays. My parents were quite devout. They're pretty thoroughly entrenched in the religion. So I remember how we were always going to church, not only on Saturdays, but also I think it was like Wednesday nights. There was Bible study.
Yeah.
They would actually go in and meet. Did they do that when you were kids too?
We did. I don't think it was every Wednesday. It might have been once a month or something. But Bible study.
It was just for the adults as far as I can remember.
The Bible study?
Teenagers. Yeah. Am I wrong about that?
I remember going, to be honest with you.
Okay, when you were younger?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then there were the High Holy Days, right?
Yeah.
And so they had the High Holy Days, which were things like Feast of Trumpets and Passover and Days of Unleavened Bread and the Day of Atonement, things like that. Sort of
last great day.
The last great day. Yeah, sort of Jewish holidays that were sort of co-opted for the Worldwide Church of God.
Yeah.
Given their own special names.
Yeah.
And then of course we were going to church twice a day. We had morning church services, and then we'd break for lunch, and we'd have another 2 hours of church services in the afternoon.
I remember that. Yep.
Yeah.
That
So,
is some interminable time.
yeah. And between the morning and afternoon services, a lot of times people get together and have like a tailgate party for lunch, and or they'd have it inside the location where they held church services and stuff. It depends.
Yeah.
By the time I got to be by the mid '60s, we had moved from Pasadena to Orange County. The church that we went to was in Santa Ana and Garden Grove, I think. But on those holy days, very often, since we were nearby in Orange County, most of the people around this area would traipse off to Ambassador College, and they would hold a lot of those services. Well, first of all, they held it in the auditorium at Ambassador College. I think it was like a big basketball auditorium or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And everybody would meet there. And then there were so many people that would come to Ambassador College that they would open up even other rooms, and then they'd beam the AV signal that they beamed to a television in other rooms and stuff like that. It started getting quite busy. Then they built the what's it called? The Ambassador.
At the Ambassador College campus, it was called Ambassador Auditorium.
All right. So yeah, when we first went to Pasadena, it was before they built that big beautiful hall that they have there.
Right.
I guess it is called the Ambassador Auditorium now, isn't it?
Mm-hmm.
So it was a gymnasium, I think, where we originally did services. And then they built the Ambassador Auditorium. And this thing is, I don't know if you've ever been inside of the Ambassador Auditorium on the Ambassador College campus. It's spectacular.
It really is. Yeah.
They put all kinds of advanced technology into giving it high-tech audio, the best sound to glorify God, with the whatever kind of special music or whatever they were having going on. And there was literally gold leaf covering the ceilings, acoustic clouds they had and stuff like that. There's beautiful wood paneling. They had a really gorgeous, expensive carpeting all over this place.
Right.
It's a spectacular auditorium.
Yes.
Well, they claimed it was for the glory of God, but yes, it was really more Herbert W. Armstrong's expensive taste.
Yes. Now, I don't know how much it cost back in the 60s to build. Maybe this was late 60s by then.
Yeah.
Probably late 60s when they built it. I don't know how much it cost to build, but it must have been a fortune. And so my parents helped fund that. But I have to say, it is a spectacular building. To this day, I think they're still holding concert series there.
Yeah, I think they are. Yep.
And decades after I was involved with the church, like I think maybe just 15 years ago or so, I went to a concert there. And it was a beautiful concert venue. It's a great place for concerts. But it was very expensive. And so then after they built that thing, somewhere around the late 60s, that's where we would go for the services on the high holy days. But we didn't do any of the pagan holidays, so there's no Christmas, right? No Easter. Those were pagan.
Very pagan.
Yeah. Halloween was definitely, that was from the devil or something. So definitely wouldn't get involved with the satanic Halloween.
Can I ask, David, did you have any notion of what pagan meant during this time period? Because honestly, Patty and I didn't even really know until we looked it up as adults. We just knew it was something synonymous with evil. Is that kind of how you had viewed the word as well? Just like us and them mentality?
That, Nancy, and also worldly.
Yes, worldly. Yes.
That's what everybody else was doing, right?
Yep. That's
good point.
all of them, and then here's us, who are not pagan. Yeah.
Yes, we were.
Yeah.
They're called the chosen ones.
Yeah. Elevated people. But, yes. Okay.
Yeah. So that was always interesting, and that was sort of uncomfortable as a child. Everybody else would be doing Christmas and Easter, and everybody would get dressed up on Halloween, except for we weren't allowed to, because when we go to school, we'd be the only ones not dressed up, because that was you know, of Satan. And also Valentine's Day, everybody would share Valentine's treats and stuff at school or whatever. They'd share cards down, and we weren't allowed to participate in that.
Yeah.
None of that stuff. So that kind of was a little bit uncomfortable.
Right.
Yeah. Did you feel like that isolated you or made you feel kind of weird and like not part of the group? Or how did you like contextualize that as a kid, do you think?
Not really.
Okay.
I don't think so. And it's interesting that you mentioned that too, because before I was an adult, it seems like almost everybody in the Worldwide Church of God, all the kids there, would go to public school.
Yeah.
And it seemed like afterwards, so many of them started doing homeschooling.
Oh.
Were you guys homeschooled or were you in public school?
No, we were in public school. What do you know what time period that was when a lot of the Worldwide Church of God kiddos started going to?
I think in the 80s, there was a whole lot of homeschooling started going on.
Okay.
Oh.
By that time, I was no longer involved, but I still had family members involved and friends. Lots of friends from the church that were still my friends and stuff.
Right. Okay.
And that's where I think a lot of them started to do the homeschooling, at least around Southern California, because, that it would help to separate the kids from all the other kids. And so they wouldn't have maybe those same sense of being different or being left out because they're indoctrinated 24/7. You know what I mean?
God forbid teaching them evolution.
I was just going to say they also wouldn't get access to evolution then.
Yes.
What's that about evolution?
That kids who were pulled out of public school wouldn't be indoctrinated into evolution then, right?
Oh, well, that's true. Yes.
From that too.
Although I don't remember ever hearing much about evolution until after I was already out of school as an adult. But everything, everybody was going to public school when I was a kid, and I don't remember feeling too badly about it. Like I said, certainly when they'd have those pagan holidays, I felt a little strange, and then the Feast of Tabernacles. Every year they would have the Feast of Tabernacles, which I guess is based on a Jewish holiday called Sukkot or something like that.
Yes.
Which is something to do with some lamp that burned for, I don't remember. I don't know the details. My some of my family members still to this day observe that Sukkot. They call it Sukkot now instead of the Feast of Tabernacles.
Oh, okay.
But the great thing is, I don't know, was it like September, October? October roll around. We'd just been in school for maybe a month or something, and everybody's head down in their studies, and we got to leave school for an entire week. We'd get out of school, and so we'd have to have the teachers would have to give us homework and stuff to study so we weren't too far behind from that week. The Feast of Tabernacles, I kind of liked that because all my friends were at school and studying hard, we would go up to, when I was a kid, a lot of the people in California, just about everybody in California, would go observe the Feast of Tabernacles at Squaw Valley, which in 1960 was the site of the Winter Olympics. Squaw Valley is now a beautiful ski area that I've skied many times. It's a fantastic ski area. So I guess the Worldwide Church of God would rent out the whole Squaw Valley area, and they had a thing called Blythe Arena, which was this big arena. I think it seated like maybe 5,000 people or something like that. And this is where during the 1960 Olympics, they'd held all the skating events. We go into the Blythe Arena, and they had these statues of skaters in there, and that was kind of a trip going in there amongst this Olympic arena. Boy, there'd be thousands of people that would all come and meet there. And so on the Feast of Tabernacles, there was the first day, which was a holy day. So we would have 2 services. And then there was about 7 days at which there would only be 1 services a day, 1 2-hour services a day, right? Mm-hmm. So we had the rest of the day to explore Lake Tahoe, which is just a gorgeous place. Mm-hmm. So we do boating and skiing, and Dad took us up in a seaplane out of Lake Tahoe once, and we did a lot of stuff like that. We'd get gifts on the Feast of Tabernacles, so didn't mind so much not having Christmas because we got the gifts.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, Patty, You and I have been to Lake Tahoe as well, right?
I was there for a YOU ski trip when I was 13.
Nice.
Yeah.
Well, you got to get back because it is a gorgeous place to visit.
Yeah.
We kind of felt special, or at least I did, and my siblings. We kind of felt special about being in the Worldwide Church of God, and we got to do the Feast of Tabernacles, even though we didn't do Christmas. That was the deal with feeling different from the other kids at school.
Mm-hmm.
I was born in 1961, so during the 60s I was a child, right?
Yeah.
So I completely bought into all the indoctrination, and I just accepted it all as truth.
Sure.
And so basically, when I was in school and the kids would ask about, what I was up to, I would just echo what I'd been taught in the school services.
Just regurgitate all those details that had been indoctrinated into you. Yeah. We did the same thing.
I wanted to mention about how they were able to afford, Garner Ted Armstrong, well, I guess the church. So Herbert W. Armstrong would also fly in a Gulfstream jet that was owned by the Worldwide Church of God.
Yeah.
Garner Ted Armstrong, he actually got a pilot's license, and he'd fly the jet around.
Yeah.
So I can recall times when we would be in Blythe Arena at Squaw Valley for one of the services, Feast of Tabernacles. And we knew that, maybe the next day or something, Garner Ted Armstrong would be there to give his sermon. And so we'd be, I can recall a number of times when we'd be in Blythe Arena and all of a sudden we'd hear a jet buzz the Blythe Arena, go roaring overhead. And this was Garner Ted Armstrong flying to Reno Airport so that he could come up to Squaw Valley the next day and give his sermon. And everybody gets so excited. Oh, Garner Ted Armstrong's here, when we'd heard the jet roar overhead, the Gulfstream that
made
they
his
flew.
presence known.
In luxury, exactly, yes.
That is an extra layer of showmanship that old Herbie never seemed to bring to the party.
Well, Garner Ted brought sort of a panache to the leadership of the Worldwide Church of God that I think actually helped it a lot, because there was a lot of, Herbert W. and the others were just kind of old, stodgy old guys, And Garner Ted was young and good looking, and all the women loved him. And
we've heard.
Yeah, and so he brought sort of a panache to it. So I think that was actually kind of helpful for the Worldwide Church of God to help, keep people involved, especially younger people, probably related better to Garner than they did to Herbert W.
Absolutely. He may have kept it going, for longer, while some of these followers of Armstrong's, being much older, maybe a lot of them would have, just kind of died out, and Garner kind of revived it. And, people love scandal, and Garner Ted Armstrong was surrounded by scandal his whole life.
Yes.
So there's that.
And he's, I don't know if he's still alive, but up until a few years ago, he was still, I stumbled across a video on YouTube of him just ministering on YouTube. I don't know how I found it, but that was kind of surprising to me. There he was as an old man, still ministering. But getting back to we had the Gulfstream jets, and they had that ambassador auditorium that they built. That's a lot of money. And the way the Worldwide Church of God funded it is they had 3 tithes, right?
Yes.
There was the first tithe. Everybody was supposed to give 10% of their gross income to the church for first tithe, 10% of everybody's gross income. Then there was the second tithe, and you were supposed to save 10% for the second tithe, and then everybody used that for themselves rather than giving it to the church during the Feast of Tabernacles. Right? Is that the way it was when you ladies were still involved?
That's how we remember it. Yep.
And then there was the third tithe, but the third tithe, fortunately, was only once every 7 years, I think. And the third tithe was another 10%. And that was, you would donate that to the church, and the church would use it for widows and orphans, and I don't know what, some such a thing. It's been a long time, so I don't remember exactly, but I think it was something like that.
Sure.
So every 7 years, people are saving or setting aside in one way or another 30% of their income for the church.
Yeah.
And then every other year, 20% required.
Right. Required. And I think the church had something to say about that if you weren't paying those tithes because they said it went directly to God.
Yes, directly to God.
Mm-hmm.
Now? Where's God's bank account again? I don't remember what who he banks with. Now, fortunately, 10% did stay with the family, so that did help fund a vacation at least of sort.
Yes.
Mr. Tabernacles
Yeah.
was very vacation-like,
Yeah,
but that's a
agreed.
lot of money.
It's a
Mhm.
lot of money, and I think it meant a lot of families didn't do any other vacations too.
Right.
Yeah,
The only
well,
one each year.
including ours. And then on top of that, on every holy day, they would have what they called offerings,
Yeah.
and they'd pass the plate around the church, and everybody would contribute. They'd stick their money in the plate. It was called the offerings, and they do that in the first service of the day. On the second service of the day, by then they counted up all the offerings that everybody had given, and they'd announce a big announcement. We had so many dollars in offerings, and everybody would cheer.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
the more money that people would give in offerings, the bigger that offering pot was, the bigger people would cheer, like, woohoo,
Yeah.
we're giving so much more. That's a lot of money that was going to the church.
I like all your detail here too, David. I mean, this is kind of triggering things that I remember and have kind of forgotten about. So I think it's really great that we have all kind of found each other and starting this dialogue. Hey, like, well, what do you remember? What do you remember? Everyone's viewpoint is so different. So I'm glad you're able to share those details, especially since you were in the church in the 60s as a child, whereas we were children in the 80s growing up in it. Big difference, but still sort of same vibe.
Now, here was an interesting, this will give you a sense of how conservative the church was. There was a guy in our church, and he was a very talented woodworker and carpenter, and he had a nice big shop and everything. And I recall in his shop, in his wood shop, he would make paddles to paddle the children, to discipline the children. He'd make these paddles out of wood, flat wooden paddles with a nice handle on it, and he'd sand up really nicely the edges, give them nice rounded edges, put a nice finish on them, make these beautiful pieces of carpentry paddles, and he'd share them with all the different parents.
Oh my gosh, that hurts.
Like,
so
here's
much.
a great gift for you. Yes, now use it to physically abuse your children.
To
Wow.
spank your kids. Yes. Now, in all fairness, later my dad used to tell us how much he hated paddling us, and it would tear him up inside.
Good.
He only did it because they told him, spare the rod, spoil the child.
Oh, hell no.
But literally, people had these paddles, and they even had a little hole you could hang it on the wall and show it off that you had a good paddle.
I mean, that's just mental abuse for the child too. They're always seeing it hanging there as a reminder, like, you obey us.
Yeah. Well, before we had the wooden paddle, my dad had it was like a paint stirring paddle that he would use to paddle us. And it was sort of like thin sheet metal rolled up at the edges or something for stirring paint. And he used that to paddle us, and that thing would sting. That hurt really bad. So when Dad got the wooden paddle, it turned out even though it was bigger and heavier, didn't hurt as bad.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a relief. And we never let on to Dad that we liked the wooden paddle better than the paint paddle that he had used previously.
Oh, terrible. I like this weapon more than the other weapon.
Hurt me with this. I can't. Oh my gosh.
We had a wooden spoon, David. That was our parents' weapon of choice. Yeah.
Wow. Well, good thing the kids never let on.
And then another thing I remember as a kid, there was a book that the Worldwide Church of God had published called 1975 in Prophecy.
We know that one. Well.
Yes. And sort of reminiscent of the book 1984 in that it was written years ahead and saying what it was going to be like on a certain year.
Yeah.
And so 1975 in Prophecy talked about how the world was going to become so sinful and everything. And one of the things that it talked about, like people were going to become so sinful and worldly by 1975 that the women would be walking around topless. They'd be so
What?
sinful. Yes.
Oh
And
no,
so,
can't have that.
no,
Doesn't that
we,
go back to that biblical verse? Haughty women have their private parts exposed and they get stabs on their head. There's something
perhaps
like
something
that.
like that. So,
Terrible.
by the time 1975 rolled around, I was 14 years old. So my hormones were starting to rage, and I was kind of looking forward to the whole women walking around topless thing.
Don't blame you.
And then 1975 came and went, and I was really disappointed. Like,
No boobs.
no boobs.
Where's my
I'm like,
boob when I need it? I didn't bring it.
and the problem here with that whole 1975 and prophecy not coming to pass is that for years the Worldwide Church of God talked about false prophets, right?
Mhm.
So they said there'd be these false prophets who would prophesy things to come and that wouldn't actually come to pass. And false prophets are agents of the devil,
Yeah.
is what they always said, right?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So when 1975 came and went, it essentially made Herbert W. Armstrong a false prophet, an agent
One
in the
would think.
devil of the devil, according to their preachings that they'd always had previously, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't recall how they got around that at the time.
But they found a way.
Maybe they just ignored it, pretend like the book never happened or something like that.
Usually they use biblical verses to say, oh, well, they won't admit that they got something wrong. They'll steer it off in a different direction usually, and then they don't talk about it anymore after that. That's kind of how they get out of these false prophecies that, the splinter churches are still spewing.
Yeah. So around that time, actually it was a little bit before 1975, I was about 13 years old, I guess, and I got appendicitis. And it was very, very painful, and I just toughed it out for a while because I didn't want to tell my mother about it because I thought she'd stop allowing me to eat or something.
Oh,
Oh
no.
no.
But finally it just got just horrific, and apparently what I later found out is it got to the point where the appendix had actually burst open, and I was really sick. And so my parents, they talked about the whole thing, and they came to me and they gave me a proposition. They gave me two choices. They said, okay, we could do one of two things about this, whatever's gotten you sick here. I should also mention that when my dad was a child, he had appendicitis. So he might have had an inkling of what was going on. So my two options were, the first option was to call an elder, which is the terminology they had sort of for like ministers on training wheels.
Yeah.
Men in the church who are being groomed to become ministers. They're called the elders. And we can have an elder come over and anoint you with oil, lay his hands on you and anoint you with oil. And basically, I guess they had some sort of cloth they'd put olive oil on and put it on your forehead or whatever. And then they'd lay their hands on top of your head and pray. And that will basically heal up anything. That's very modern medicine, I guess, at the time for the Worldwide Church of God.
Because David, just to reiterate, the Worldwide Church of God never taught that people could go to doctors or use medicine, correct? As far as I know, they never changed those teachings.
I don't recall any prohibitions on it.
Okay.
Going to the hospital or modern medicine.
Okay.
But I suppose it's possible. One of my options was to be anointed with oil and have hands laid on me. And the other option was I could go to the hospital. I think that the first option was probably my mother's, that she would have preferred I chosen. And the second option was probably my father's, as he had experience with appendicitis when he was a kid.
Okay.
I'm guessing that's probably what it was. And fortunately, I chose the second option. Went to the
Yes.
hospital.
Oh my goodness.
And they basically cleaned out all the infection that had spilled out of the appendix into my abdomen and sewed me up, and I got better.
Good.
So that went well. It was not too long after that my father got excommunicated from the church when I was a
Yeah.
teenager. Um,
Mm.
and
Okay.
he had become involved. I didn't know it at the time, but it turned out he'd become involved in a extramarital relationship with somebody else in the church.
Oh, and
And
he got
so
caught.
that was a big no-no. And I guess word got around and he was excommunicated. So basically, he stopped going to church. We still went every week with my mother, and
Mhm.
of course, that's when my parents' marriage started falling apart. And they literally got up in front of the church and told everybody to not associate at all with my father.
Oh.
Ugh.
Yeah, so that was a thing. That was like if anybody did anything against the church, that's what they did was they called it excommunication.
Yes. And there were so
Yeah,
many people excommunicated as well. Our father included.
really.
Yeah.
Your father was excommunicated as well?
From David C. Pack's church, Restored Church of God. Yes.
Ah, all right. So we were still heavily involved as kids. My mother was still involved, and by that time I was a teenager. And so I remember what probably to help retain some cohesiveness amongst kids and help prevent them from being lured away by everything that was going on with the worldly kids around there and public school and all. They had a lot of youth activities in the
Yeah.
church.
Mhm.
So they had these. I think I heard you talking about them in one of your podcasts.
YOU. Yeah, the youth program. Yeah.
And so we would have these youth activities. We'd go down to Ambassador College and have track meets, and we would have campouts and stuff like that. And then I started becoming into my late teens, and by then I was, becoming interested in girls and stuff like that. And there was a very, very strong prohibition on any kind of extramarital sex, of course.
Mhm. Of course.
And here I was finding myself desiring all these girls in the church.
Mhm.
But we would have these campouts that the teens would go to. There was a one particular girl. I guess she wasn't all in on the whole no extramarital sex thing. So
Mhm.
her and I used to hook up at the campouts and stuff. So I got to the point in my late teens where I really loved church because none of the girls at school were interested in me, but the church girls were was where I was getting my action.
Oh, oh my.
Girls
Yes.
in the church choir.
That is such an interesting commentary.
And of
Wow.
course there was we weren't there was the kids were not to do any kind of drugs or anything, and I started having people trying to coax me or get me interested in marijuana.
Mhm.
Oh.
And so I started getting tempted by that. And I think that's when I guess you could still say I was involved with the church, but I don't know how much I cared about their doctrines
Hmm.
at the time.
Was it
That's
just
fair.
more of a lifestyle for you, maybe, huh?
Yeah, by
What you
then
were
most
used
of
to.
my friends were in the church,
Yeah.
you know.
Ah,
Yeah, I guess it was mostly a lifestyle thing.
like a social, like your social place.
And then I guess by about age 17, I actually, just shortly after I turned 17 years old, I actually had moved out of the home. I was no longer living with my mother. By then, my mother and father had divorced. That was really the end of my time involved with the Worldwide Church of God. So that was like 1978 or so. So that's kind of
1978.
my story.
Yeah.
So,
Well,
can I ask, what has life been like for you since getting out of the church? Did you ever continue to follow any of the teachings of the church? I mean, did any of them kind of stick
No,
with you,
not
or?
at all. I still had some friends who were involved in the church, but I stopped going to church. Yeah, I didn't get involved in the teachings at all. But my family, to this day, it's not called the Worldwide Church of God anymore. But my mother and my sister and her whole family, they still observe all those same doctrines and holidays and stuff like that that the Worldwide Church of God did.
They would have to be in one of the splinter churches then, is that correct? Do you know which one?
They were for a while. I don't remember all the names. They were involved in some of the splinter churches, but now they just sort of do it as home fellowships.
Okay.
There's a
Huh.
lot of like-minded people that they somehow meet and stuff. And like, I know my sister, she's got 7 kids, all of which she homeschooled, so she could thoroughly indoctrinate them. And so they still observe, and they get like 20 or 30 people come over to their big house they have there, and every Sabbath, and they have the home fellowship, and they study the Bible and talk about what it says and stuff like that.
Is there a name associated with that you're aware of?
Not that I'm aware of, no.
Huh.
Okay, just at home.
Some
Okay.
sort of home
Yeah, very
fellowship.
interesting.
And they used to live in California, and they did it here in Southern California. Then they moved to Texas, and they found like-minded people out in Texas, and they still do it out there.
No, that's good to know that there are still people that they might not necessarily be in one of the splinter churches, but they are still observing a lot of the teachings. Because I know Worldwide Church of God did keep the name after Joseph W. DeKoch changed the doctrine following Herbert W. Armstrong's death, and it is now called Grace Communion International. But
Really?
the teachings are completely different. I mean, it's very much just an Orthodox evangelical church now.
Yeah, I heard they even go to church on Sundays now instead of observing the Sabbath.
Oh, everything's changed. Right. It's just mainstream church now, mainstream Christianity.
And how did the Sabbath become Saturday, like the seventh day? Like, did they have the Gregorian calendar back when
that was
when
exactly
God told the Jewish people?
Question, David. You know what? My father, the reason that he was excommunicated by the pastor David C. Pack at Restored Church of God is my father. That was his question to him. He put together, and I don't know how long it was, but this whole report, it must have been 20 some pages on what constituted a day. And he was questioning this whole, Sabbath, sundown to sundown, Friday night to Saturday night. I guess because he questioned David C. Pack, he was excommunicated. So our father has been looking into it as well. But the horrible takeaway from that is our father blamed himself. He didn't get out of that like, oh, maybe I should study more and maybe I should look into this a little bit more. No, he told himself he should not have questioned David C. Pack. That was his takeaway.
It's interesting when you said that about your father. Like my father, he was so entrenched in this that he was an engineer. So he had an engineering mind. And I remember he went and plotted out this big long graph. He read the Bible end to end, and he plotted out this big long graph where he looked at all the so-and-so begat so-and-so and a timeline and everything to plot out how long ago all these things in the Bible happened, and he became a real young Earth creationist.
Oh.
And now my father left the church after he was excommunicated. This happened before he was excommunicated. But to this day, my mother, she's still a young Earth creationist. She's convinced the Earth is less than 10,000 years old.
A lot of Christians today do, but I feel like with Worldwide Church of God, the Earth was almost recreated. Is that correct? Like there was this big battle between the angels and demons, God and Satan.
Well, yeah, I guess wasn't that how it became? The Earth became without form and void. I think the scripture says, or something like that.
Okay.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. I'm so curious, David. You mentioned all of the opulence of the campus and the auditorium and things like that. I guess I'm not knowing that time frame as well. I'm kind of imagining like the hippiness of the 60s, and then all I know is the 80s when everything was like lifestyles of the rich and famous. I mean, is there something you could add to your thoughts about what the 70s was like in terms of how people thought about that opulence? And like, were they excited for it? Were they pushing against it?
Yes, it was the glory of God. It was God showering his blessings on his one true church.
Okay, yeah, they looked at it as a good thing. Yeah.
So then did you see that as like in the context of the 1970s of just like American culture around it? Was there also kind of this like growing drive for loving opulence and like feeling like that was good and important?
Not that I recall. I think most of the people were just middle class people.
Okay. Huh.
Most of my friends and the people who were in the church and what have you. I remember there was one guy, he was a millionaire, and he lived down in Newport Beach at the Balboa Bay Club. And I remember one time going to visit him when I was a kid. He had a yacht parked out behind his home, and he had this big, beautiful home in the Balboa Bay Club with all kinds of I remember he had like a sculpture and stuff like that. He was the only rich guy there. He did really good
Okay.
from real estate, I guess. But most of
Oh,
us were
sure.
just middle class.
You know, for us being in California and then having moved to Wisconsin, I felt like I saw a big difference in the money situation of the people in each of those churches. Like, definitely there was more wealthy people in the California one, and definitely more lower to maybe
Really?
middle class in Wisconsin. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that is just really interesting to hear, like the 1960s and 70s piece of it.
Yeah, but I mean, it never really, the whole experience, I don't think ever really scarred me too much as a child.
That's
Yeah.
good.
There was, like I said, there's some awkward parts, but for the most part, it wasn't bad. And I think I kind of called myself a believer for a while, even though I wasn't involved at all with the church. But I
Mhm.
think it was only because I'd been indoctrinated in it since I was a youth. And
Mhm.
I think if people would ask me if I believed in God, I'd say, yeah. But looking back, I don't know if I ever really had any conviction.
Mm.
So
Mhm.
I'm not convinced that I was ever really a believer, like I might say I was.
Sure.
But I'm not convinced I was ever really a believer, looking back in retrospect.
Right.
I was just parroting what I learned.
Yeah.
For sure. I mean, in a way, we're all parroting what we learned and or acting out of, well, I've been told this is how I'm good and how good things happen for me, so I guess I'll do it.
Yeah.
And I have since deconstructed, and I have another brother who deconstructed. But then I
Oh,
have a brother and a sister who are still believers.
Oh,
40 years later.
wow.
yeah.
Yeah.
Some people,
Amazing.
yeah, they're just lifers. They think, yeah, this is how it's supposed to be. And
And I still know a lot of the people that I met in the church. I still have some
Really?
friends that I've known since childhood. Yeah,
Mhm.
Oh,
and a lot of them have since become non-believers themselves.
Right.
Like that one girl I was telling you about who kept me interested through my later teens. we're we're still platonic friends, Facebook friends and
Oh,
stuff, and we get
love it.
together when she comes back to California and stuff.
well, that's nice.
Yeah,
I'm
so I
glad you
still
got
have a few friends.
I'm glad you got good experiences out of this, David. And it's nice to see that though some people can be traumatized by a lot of these teachings, there can be little good bits in there as well. Well, take what we make of it, right?
Yeah, I don't know how many good things came out of the church itself. Any good
Well,
things probably could have happened in spite of the church.
Yeah.
good things in between, yes.
Yes, okay, yes. In that sense,
Uh,
certainly.
Patty and I
Yeah, I
took,
have some fun memories.
yeah, exactly. You can focus on those great things. And Patty and I did take a trip out to San Jose, California, where we grew up, and we thought, well, how is this going to play out? Are we going to have kind of these negative memories flooding back in as we go and see a lot of these places that we used to frequent when we were children? And we didn't get any of that. In fact, it was just all good vibes when we were out there. We had a blast because we were remembering all the good times of our childhood, not focusing on the negative aspects that came out of this church. And so I think we've definitely overcome. And I'm glad that your experiences were mostly good. I think it does make a difference that you being a white male, as opposed to us females. Males in general, I think, had it a lot better in
Definitely.
the church than the females, for
I would
sure.
agree with
So,
that.
yes,
Mm.
It's such a misogynistic doctrine.
right.
Yes.
You
Good
you
point.
can't have female ministers. And even the elders were all men.
Right.
Mhm.
Yep. We do have a brother out there too. We have a younger brother as well as a younger sister. I'm sure our brother remembers things a lot differently than we do. Him being a man growing up in this.
Is he still a believer?
I don't know if he necessarily believes. I think he's going through the motions simply because he was taught it. There are
Yeah.
times I'm still, in contact with him, not often, but there are times he won't eat bacon and
Yeah.
sometimes he'll eat pork just because. I mean, I think like a lot of
Yep.
Christians today, they just kind of pick and choose what to follow.
And
Yeah.
when. Yep.
Yeah, and when. Yes.
Well, I think everybody does, as you could tell by what I mentioned happened with my father.
Yeah. Right.
Everybody
No
picks and
kidding.
chooses.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's kind of a big choice. Yeah. Well, let's see. Nancy, do you have any more questions for David?
I don't think so. I just kind of went into this. I'm like, I just want to have a conversation with you, David. I want you to tell your story. And again, it's just brought up a lot of memories for us as well. It hasn't it, Pats? I mean, I know.
Yeah.
Have you been following our timeline on Herbert W. Armstrong
I
at all,
have.
David? Okay, because now it's really starting to make sense, and I'm glad that we did it, because now here you are coming out saying, "Well, I grew up in the '60s and '70s." I'm like, okay, well, I remember reading so much about it before we got into it in the '80s. So
It seems to me from what I've watched of your podcast that it wasn't too different in the
Yeah.
60s and the 70s than it was in the 80s.
well, yeah, as far as doctrine goes, I don't think a lot changed. There may have been some back and forth, but the main structure of it was there. The Sabbath, don't eat pork or shellfish.
Yeah.
The holy days, don't celebrate pagan holidays. It was all still there.
What I experienced resonated with you guys then.
Oh, definitely.
For
And I actually think it's really interesting to hear your perspective of the pre-1975 time, just because
Yeah.
that seems like this pivotal moment of like everything was supposed to change and then nothing didn't. So it makes me think part of the reason we got the same experience really as you did was there was probably just a big doubling down that happened, right? Of like just reinforce the basics again after the big failure of that prophecy.
Well, and David, something was supposed to happen in 1972 as well. Do you remember, was that supposed to be the time period where, God was supposed to take his chosen people to the place of safety, which was Petra, Jordan? Does that ring a bell? at
Petra,
all?
that's right.
Yeah.
Petra in the place of safety. I forgot all about that. Yeah, that was the big thing. Everybody in the Worldwide Church of God, somehow we're all going to get together and all go to Petra of all places.
Mhm.
I don't know where Herbert got the idea that Petra was the place.
I want to
but-
say it goes back to like a root word. I think Petra means rock. And
yeah, it's a
I
big
think-
canyon.
Yeah, absolutely. It was featured in Indiana Jones in The Last Crusade. You remember?
Yeah.
Which
I mean,
is
it's
funny.
basically a canyon in the middle of the desert. That's
Yes.
the place of safety. Easy to defend. Maybe that's why it's a place of safety.
The Cave of
Maybe.
Adullam or whatever the fuck
It's easy
called.
to defend because the only way to get in there is through this narrow canyon. So it's easy to defend or come in by helicopter, I guess.
Oh, okay.
Petra, the place of safety.
Yeah.
Yes, we were all going to meet out there. I don't remember that being 1972, though, Nancy. I don't really.
Okay.
That was
There was
basically
something-
going to happen before the return of God.
Okay. I was a little confused between the 1972 and 1975 bit. And I know that book, 1975 in Prophecy, did change a few times. And so I don't know if I can even find the original that Armstrong wrote. And I don't know exactly how it changed over the years, but
I found a version of it online.
yeah, there's quite
And
a
I
few
started-
online.
Yeah, I started looking through it and seeing the old pictures, and it reminded me because we had 1975 in Prophecy in our bookshelf.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
So it was reminding me, it's bringing back these old memories, all the pictures that they drew, that this is what the Earth is going to look like in 1975.
They were horrible and scary.
Yeah, except for the topless part.
Was there an illustration of that at all, David?
Unfortunately, that part was left out of the illustration.
Well,
Ah, it's funny.
David, I love it. Oh my God, this is such a treat to talk to you. This is really nice.
Mhm.
Well, it's been fun bringing up all these old memories, ladies.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you so much for joining us for this episode.
Yeah.
Yes, I know
Really
we'll have
my
more to talk
pleasure.
about in the future too.
Yeah, well, sometime if you ever want to talk about anything else, let me know.
Absolutely.
Yeah, we'd
But,
love
well,
to.
Yeah.
Well, Nancy and Patty, it's been a pleasure.
It has
Yes,
been a
thank
pleasure.
you so much. Thanks everybody for joining us for this interview session with David. Later.